Well, hello there. It is good to see you again, and welcome back to the latest installment of Path to Abundant Living. I'm your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff. It's good to be back with you guys today on the show. And as always, we have our stars in Mr. Scott Morrison and Matt Nordman of Morrison, Nordman and Associates. They're jumping aboard, and we're going to be tackling another wealth management discussion on the show. That's what we do here. But today, we're going to be taking a unique angle towards wealth management as a whole. Particularly, we're going to be talking about goal setting. So, to frame things up for you, there's no shortage of goals really that we have out there that we want to achieve for ourselves, for our families, our communities, maybe even our financial portfolios as a whole. But defining these meaningful goals and then really pursuing them intelligently tends to be a big challenge for so many of us out there. And today, Scott, Matt, and myself are going to be looking at different ways that we can not only develop that clear vision, but then translate that vision into actionable objectives so that you can go out there and pursue those goals with maybe a little gusto or some pep in your step. So that being said, let's go ahead and bring Matt and Scott on. Matt, Scott, it's good to see you guys this morning. How are you doing?
Morning, Ryan.
Doing well, Ryan. Great to see you. Scott, good to see you as well.
Awesome.
Hi,
Yeah, good to be with you guys. Hey, we're talking about goal setting today. Scott, I'll throw this over to you, just so you can kind of set the scene, if you will, for our audience. Why is it that you guys felt it was important to jump into this idea of goal setting in today's episode?
Well, as wealth managers, our most important discussions with our clients and prospective clients, for that matter, are about a full range of goals that they have, whether they be professional, personal, social, charitable, and financial, of course. So getting clarity on these goals is definitely at the top of the list. It's some of the most important and meaningful conversations we have.
Matt, Scott just mentioned that word clarity, and boy, does that come up a lot on this show in at large. But in today's conversation, do you find, Matt, that people really need help coming up with their goals and just developing them in the first place?
It's funny, Ryan. Most of us rarely, if ever, run out of goals to pursue, right? There's so much that we all want to accomplish, be personal or professional, and most likely it's both. Often though, we don't consider two very important questions that we need to ask ourselves. And so we would say, ask yourself first, how good are you honestly, be honest with yourself at consistently achieving truly meaningful goals that you have set out for yourself. And then two, how often do the goals that you deem to be important, they get sidelined, pushed off, or eliminated entirely from your list? Even if you pursue your goals like crazy, you are all in 100%. We'd bet that, your efforts at reaching your objectives could use at least a little bit of work. And, that's the case that we have seen with most people.
So in terms of beginning, it really sounds like it's starting with the true setting of the goal. Scott, am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely. You want to be extremely clear on what you actually want to do, right? And, so we recommend that you enlist the right people for assistance and identify what you should do, what you shouldn't do, if you want to really get to the finish line. That takes a series of mindsets and action steps aimed at improving your ability to focusing on the outcomes that you want the most and need in life. Make sure they're measurable and be accountable to them. It's really easy to set a goal, but can you actually measure the goal? And can you say, check that off your list in terms of the action steps to achieve the goal or to head toward the goal? And if you can do that, then, more often than not, you're going to achieve it.
So, if we're looking at this idea of goal setting specifically, before we get a little deeper into the conversation, guys, Matt, what would you say is probably action step number one of just truly intelligent and smart goal setting?
Okay, Ryan, this is going to probably sound very obvious. First step, create that clear vision of what you want your life to look like. The idea of, as Stephen Covey said, and a lot of other goal setting experts, is start with the end in mind. This has been long emphasized. And so we have seen so many people, though, who skip this step and they don't really go deep and generate that clear, compelling vision that feels real and meaningful. And so as a result, they end up implementing strategies without that strong enough vision to support them. And that, of course, leads to a lot of drifting and wasted time. The key is to create that robust vision in your mind. Too often people stop at a vision statement, that short 1 or 2 sentences that, you see on the coffee mug or the t-shirt. What you want is something that's strong enough to actually act as that filter for all your daily decisions. So think of a vision script, if you will. It might be 3 to 5 pages that creates that crystal clear picture of where you want to be, approximately 3 years from today.
So, I mean, I love the idea of getting really granular in terms of what that big picture looks like for yourselves. But Scott, take us a step further. What would you say is probably that next step in terms of this idea of really thoughtful goal setting?
Well, if that big vision is going to be, clear, and you're going to distill it down into actual actionable steps, then you're going to have to go through the process of identifying your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. Now, for a lot of people, they've kind of put that list on their page and said, well, what are my strengths and weaknesses? But oftentimes they're not really dealing with the things that are that one overarching problem that always gets in the way. It might be something personal. It might be a phobia or a fear or just an inhibition. But if it's not resolved, you're going to have a very difficult time realizing your vision. So in other words, nothing else matters until that issue is addressed successfully. Once you've been able to identify these things and what must be addressed in order to make meaningful progress in the next 3 to 5 years, or whatever time you target, then you can say, hey, I've got a to-do list. You want to make sure that to-do list isn't a mile long. You need to work it down into a workable list, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would imagine this is probably a pretty big problem or a challenge for many of us is taking that big list of all these goals and aspirations that we have for our lives and then just really whittling down so that you can hone in or pursue maybe 1 or 2 key goals that might help achieve maybe the other list of goals. Matt, any advice on how to go through that process of narrowing down that laundry list of goals into maybe a few easier ones, or maybe easy isn't the right word, but just a few that are worthwhile to really pursue in the first place?
Sure, Ryan. So one approach, and again, it's going to probably sound really, really obvious, is to go after those goals that have that really large upside if they work, but the downside is small if they don't. But most people will gravitate to the exact opposite, that relatively small upside with significant downside. Don't overlook a goal because it seems small. If your goal is focused in the right area, it can have a really big impact, even if it's small. In business, that might mean, just that 1% increase. You don't necessarily have to have sweeping changes to your products or services or aggressively pursue new markets or, redesign your entire organizational structure. You can double down and, on your existing sales and marketing, and again, maybe a small price hike might do it 1%, and in your relationships, you don't necessarily need to give those expensive, dazzling gifts to, your spouse or significant other to, reignite that interest in you, or in each other. The best move might be to say, okay, what are those 2 or 3 or 4 things that this person that's really important to me, they just don't enjoy doing. And so what if you did those for them, pick 1 each week and do them for the next 3 months? That can have while might seem small, could have a significant impact.
And guys, in terms of the amount of goals, would you say, is there like a magic number that people should be seeking to pursue in, let's say, 6 or 12 months in that time frame? Is there a magic number here?
Well, we typically aim for no more than 12 in a year or 3 in a quarter. What we find is anything more than that, then you take on the risk of getting frustrated. And if you're not reaching enough goals, then you're tipping the scales towards failure. So, the goals need to be specific and measurable and come with a time limit for completion so that you can hold yourself accountable. And what I really feel is important is that those goals should be somewhat risky. I mean, they should be somewhat uncomfortable, because oftentimes what gets in our way is in personal growth is some sort of an inhibition. And so oftentimes we're going to have to deal with that inhibition, and it's not necessarily going to come very easy or very often. So it's some of those things that we need to make sure that our goals are realistic, that we can overcome those inhibitions with personal growth. But if you can't, then you're going to come away from it feeling pretty frustrated and unfulfilled.
Right, and then you're back to square one in the first place, and
Yep.
you're rethinking the goals that you even thought about in the first, in terms of what matters to you. So, guys, one thing that we do a lot on this show is, I mean, we talk about these different strategies and solutions that you're working with your clients on, in all these different areas of wealth management. Obviously, today we're talking about goal setting. It certainly is an area of wealth management, but it's equally as important to talk about some of the mistakes that exist out there that you guys are noticing, that we're seeing people make. And, while we're not talking about a specific strategy or solution within wealth management today, we're talking about goal setting. I think it's also important to talk about maybe the mistakes that you guys see in terms of goal setting. So, Matt, I'll throw this one over to you. Do you see any mistakes that people are making as they're looking out and trying to develop that vision and define their goals and pursue these? Any issues you're seeing on this front?
There's some definite potential pitfalls, and so that's where we would say, be careful you're not trying to achieve, this tremendous success in your business or career at the expense of the quality of life. Don't compromise your health or your most important relationships. You can strike that a better balance, as we say, and build an amazing life of significance across the board, rather than falling victim to that, the hustle fallacy that says sacrifice everything else, for your own personal ambition. Another mistake relates back to that concept of having that vision. Don't allow yourself to kind of water down your vision simply because you can't immediately see how you're going to achieve it. You might want to start with that bold vision, but you don't have that clear path. You've got it ready, and you're like, hey, congratulations if you don't have that clear path. Because what you want to do is, don't get nervous, dial back the vision where you can see, okay, specific strategies. Well, those are all the things that you've always done. And the old saying, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. So stick with that vision that causes you that discomfort and uncertainty. And that type of vision, it's going to challenge your existing thinking and motivate you and the people around you, your family, your team members, to do great things. As someone shared with me years ago, and it's, be comfortable being uncomfortable, because that is generally when and where we grow the most.
Oh, no, well said. And Matt and Scott, I know you guys are having a lot of these individualized conversations around goal setting, especially within that discovery process that we've talked about on this show when you're working with your clients. So for those out there in our audience that are hearing today's conversation about goal setting, and they're thinking their own goals and aspirations for their future through, and maybe they're realizing it would be helpful to sit down and talk with somebody about it, really get a lot of this out, and like you said at the top of the show, get granular on that big picture idea for themselves. What would be the best way they could reach out to you two and your team, just to open up a dialogue and sit down and maybe work with you to go through this idea of setting goals that are individualized for them and their family and so on?
Anyone can go to our website, morrisonnordman.com, click on the link. It says, I want to learn more, set up a short phone call where we can kind of delve into, what are those goals and aspirations in that vision that you have. And so if you're more traditional, pick up the phone, 517-333-7967. And that's where we would say, whether you are far along in your vision, you just want to review it, or you haven't even begun, take that next step.
Alrighty, fantastic. Well, guys, look, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day. I know you got a lot of clients to serve. We'll let you get back to doing that. But really good conversation here on the show around goal setting today. A lot of valuable insight into this, what could seem like an easy topic, but when you really whittle down to it, I mean, so many people, we stray away from our goals, right? Because we're not implementing those actionable steps that have, true intent and objectives behind them. And just a lot of good stuff today. And looking forward to being back on the next one with you guys.
Thanks, Ryan. Have a great day.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, thanks, fellas. And hey, look, we want to take one final moment, as always, and say thank you to our audience for spending some time with us here on the show today. If you benefited from today's conversation in any way, shape, or form, you took something away from it, do us a favor and subscribe to the show on whichever platform you check this out on. That way you never miss out on a different, a future or maybe even a past episode covering a great conversation. Also share this information, right, with any friends, family, business owners, anybody that you think would benefit from these types of discussions, because at the end of the day, we're really just taking the strategies and the solutions and the conversations that Matt and Scott are having with their clients on a regular basis and bringing them right here to you guys on this show. So for Scott, for Matt, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long, but we appreciate you stopping by and being with us on today's installment of Path to Abundant Living.